here at Damon Benning to preview this weekend's matchup against USC. Damon, two teams that are coming off a bye. A lot has happened for these two teams in that time. To get everyone up to speed, Nebraska has brought in Phil Snow as a defensive consultant and Dana Holgorsen as an offensive consultant, as we all know, who will now be the offensive coordinator for the remainder of the season. And then you have USC, on the other hand, who has gone a different direction at quarterback. They're going away from Miller Boss, who has been the starter so far. Nebraska's on a 3-game losing streak. USC's lost 4 out of 5. When you look at this whole maybe mess of for between these two teams, just how much does the situation come into play this weekend?
Well, it's going to be interesting, right? I think for USC, they're so far under the expectation levels coming into this one with a losing record. You've made a quarterback change as Miller Moss has hit the transfer portal. The NCAA has announced their violations from the 22 and 23 season. So there's a little bit, I think, of a cloud hanging over this program. But the advantage they have is the game's at home,
right,
where they have played better football. So that may be the great equalizer for Nebraska. While it hasn't been as rainbowy and butterfly as you may want it to be, I do think there's this little undertone of optimism that Coach Rule has decided to kind of make some changes within the program. You mentioned Phil Snow, who's been kind of an advisor all season to Nebraska. So that part isn't as new as Dana Holgorsen.
He's just
obviously
been in the building last week, correct?
Well, he was Zooming, according to Coach Rule. So, maybe we're splitting hairs, but I think generally speaking, I think the optimism comes from the fact that Coach Rule is willing to consult and kind of get answers from people that he trusts. Because that even answers a question that I had about Coach Rule when I said, who's his guys? Who's he going to confide in crunch time? And obviously he's answered some of those questions with his relationship with Coach Snow, who at the start of putting this staff together, I think a lot of people guessed that would be his guy. But Coach Snow is a little older, wants to do some other things at this phase in his life, didn't want to commit to full-time coaching. So maybe this scratches both their itches. I think from Coach Holgorsen, Coach Rule sought counsel from guys that had given him problems in the past. And Coach Holgorsen and that offense has been a thorn in the side of Coach Rule, and he knows it pretty well. And I think he felt like the language and the overlapping in terms of schemes and continuity would be similar enough to be able to make the transition in the offseason. So from a fan base standpoint, there's shoot, right? I mean, I'm curious to see if it can work, how quick it can work. But I am optimistic as a fan, knowing, well, at least it's not the same, right? Because I think, unfortunately, that's the general consensus heading into Los Angeles. But I think the players know that they've got a clean slate, fresh set of eyes, and competition matters. So a little bit different feel heading into this one in terms of where the trajectory, but both have answers, none the same.
Yeah, this week, and I feel like last week mostly, I heard you refer back to the conversations you had with Rule the first time you sat down with him, and you've been brought back to those conversations a lot. Do you think there's an importance in how consistent Rule has been in his messaging since this past week in the chaos to even when he talked to you when he came in and nothing had happened yet?
Yeah, I think so. I think for me, that's the part that's most that gives me the most optimism, right? Where he still continues to be self-aware, said that he'd be willing to do what it takes to move the program forward. He described himself as kind of a lifelong learner that was coming with this core group of guys that had done it before. And I remember I'd asked him the question, I said, how fine a line is it between I've been there and done that in terms of the rebuilds where it can make you a little overly confident that it's portable versus being a lifelong learner and tweaking it along the way and knowing you're in Lincoln. And we're kind of getting the answer to the latter, right?
Yeah.
Where there are some similarities. He said, hey, listen, 95% of what we're doing is good. We need some fine-tuning and some tweaking. And I'm willing to do that. And he's willing to do that by making himself a little uncomfortable along the way and taking some ownership. But that's always one of the things that I've gravitated towards him for is he's not infallible or flawless, yet he's highly competitive, so he's not easily deterred. And he's goal oriented. So those are some things that I'm going to kind of always rally around, because I think that's life 101.
Yeah. Well, with Holgorsen coming in, he's already mentioned it's not going to change the playbook entirely. But if you were to guess, and this is a challenging question, but how does he tweak the offense on such a short notice? And also, how does taking context out of things matter this weekend?
So I think there's two really important things whenever you're coming in new to something. You have to be able to quickly assess what this team does do well. And then you have to see how that fits with your personality traits in terms of what he likes to do as a coach. So I think the marrying of those two things will be critical. Coach Holgorsen likes a lot of the quick passing game. When his quick passing game has a shot element component to it, where you can get vertical with some of the option routes if a defender's playing it a certain way. Running the football, he constantly puts your flat defenders in conflict, where it's like, is this run or pass? He's very good with those RPO concepts. So what I think what he's done in watching Nebraska is, okay, where they had success with some of those concepts and how can I marry them? But then finally, probably the most important thing is when you come in with a new, fresh set of eyes, you can just look simply at who wants to compete and what their talent level is versus having any preconceived notions. Right. You can say, hey, listen, I want to play this guy. Or how come this guy isn't playing more? Let's play this guy more. Or whatever it is, I think a new, fresh set of eyes will do that. And that can encourage everybody, right? Hey, competition is on the table. I want to impress. So it can reinvigorate in the short term.
Yeah. I guess we don't have this question yet because we didn't hear from coordinators and we didn't hear from players yesterday.
It's by design, I think.
Right, which smart probably, right?
Yeah. Keep the drama down.
Yeah. All the information's right here. We don't have we don't have a Dylan update. How different does that game plan look on Saturday if you think Heinrich is leading the offense?
Well, I think it's going to be different to some degree. You may be playing to Coach Holgorsen's strengths a little more in terms of implementing concepts quickly. Because he does have the running dynamic from the quarterback spot. But I think you always want your best players to have the opportunity to play, and so Nebraska will be chomping at the bit to get Raiola back. And I like how they played it close to the vest. I think they have a really good idea of what's going to happen at the quarterback spot. But considering you're on the road and it's already a new scheme, why not throw in the wrinkles of not knowing who's going to play quarterback? For USC's game plan as well.
Yeah. Before we move on from this Holgorsen conversation, there's a lot of mixed feelings about the shuffling of pieces just by how unique this move is. But I don't want to move past this. And I mentioned this when I heard Coach Rule say it, but he mentioned Coach Satterfield and how he handled the situation. And he said, I understand this is a results business, but we are still trying to teach life lessons here. Yeah. He mentioned how great of a guy Satterfield is and how all of his offensive coaches have basically opened up the playbook to Dana and said, what do you need? How can we get you up to speed? And Satterfield has been like, what do I need to do? Not to forget that he's not with his family. He could just say, I'm out of here. Thank you. But he did not do that. That's what Coach Rule said. Now he's helping the tight ends. Why is that so important? And if you think this offense starts to trend positively in the next few weeks and maybe the tight ends become even more crucially impactful than they have been, do you think people have to or need to point and say this was still a pivotal moment for Satterfield to do what he did? Yeah,
I think he's a representative of what we want as a fan base, right? Loyalty, hardworking, willing to take constructive criticism and still do the job at hand. Those are all qualities we want. Right. There's qualities that we kind of gravitate towards. And I think they can acknowledge, hey, listen, we had some shortcomings here, but it's more of a speed bump than it is a roadblock, turn around, go back. And so the one thing that I kind of hope comes out of this, and the players need to see this too from like a modeled behavior standpoint, it didn't go the way that somebody wanted it to. But he's so other-centered invested from this is the end-game goal that I'm willing to cheer for other people even though it's at my own expense. Like that's invaluable. So the players can see that. And perhaps for the adults and the fan base, I think if used correctly and it does trend in the positive direction, it's probably the best example of caring and not coddling.
Right.
Where, I can love you, and there may be some criticisms and some critiquing along the way, but it's for your own good, and it's for the greater good. Coach Satterfield could, fortunately, be that sacrificial lamb, because I think they have the kind of relationship where this isn't the first time it's happened. It's been done before. But the decisions that they make are for the greater good of the program. And I think Coach Satterfield knows that Coach Rule is for him.
Yeah. You put yourself in that situation, and all this chaos is happening around you as a player. Coach Satterfield's movement here, does that calm the chaos, or what do you learn in that situation as a player?
Yeah, I think you, if that were me, I think you do learn.
Yeah.
You're like, wow, this is, first of all, you probably question if you're capable of doing that. Well, am I capable? I've watched this guy be raked over the coals for 6-7 weeks, kind of be demoted. He's still here for us. He's loyal to the soil, and he's going to continue to work hard. It did not deter his work ethic. Those are like a lot of the things that you want to build on, and you want that as a player.
Right.
They're continually recruiting over you. There's competition every day. There's a greater good at the end of the tunnel that you're supposed to be striving for. Most of us couldn't handle that practical application. I think it's good for the players to see.
Yeah. Well, we shift our focus to USC. As we already mentioned, Miller Moss will not be in the quarterback position. They are transferring to the transfer, Jaden Mayava from UNLV. He'll get the start. He had a big year last year at UNLV. What have you seen from him in the film so far? Is this an advantage or disadvantage for Nebraska?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. He's not as accurate. And so if you can keep coverage tight, you got to understand, well, he's still got to make big boy throws. So you can decide how you can kind of direct where you want the ball to go. Do we want this to be a shot thing? You're going to have to throw it over our head, or are we going to constrict you? So there's that aspect of it. And for him, while he does add a little bit of he's elusive and he can run, I don't know if I got to go back and look. I don't think he's had a game in which he rushed for more than 40 yards. So he can move and he's mobile, but I'm not sure they want to make a living just with quarterback run game. What he does do is he takes a lot of pressure off your running backs because there are multiple options in the backfield with that zone read game. But I don't know if that's what SC needs, right? If you ask their fan base and kind of the media, it's that they've been too conservative and they don't take enough shot plays. So we'll see which wins out. Are we doing what we need to do and give our offense the best chance to win, or are we doing the thing that's most advantageous to calm the waters in the meantime? Let's hope that that's a dilemma. Yeah,
well, Rule mentioned all the threats that USC poses on the ground. Where do you see that being a challenge for Nebraska this week?
Well, it's just hard, right? You go back to concepts like Indiana where you have interior run game, you have edge run game, you've got an RPO option out on the perimeter, and you've got a vertical threat. It's hard to stop. So, again, if I'm Nebraska, what I try to do is I try to take away the run game. I will take my chances on the back end with the secondary, keep things in front, tackle in space. I would not allow USC to be even-handed. If I'm going to dictate where the ball's going to go, I want them to have to throw it to beat us.
Yeah, beat the D-line.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I don't have to remind everyone. It's been a challenging few weeks for Nebraska, and, of course, they've had to sit in it these last, almost 14 days it feels like. For Nebraska, I know in this preview we've barely even talked about football, but it seems like this is an emotional game, and Coach Rule has mentioned the ups and downs has been his biggest challenge so far. When you watch this game on Saturday, will it be something you noticed in the first quarter that says, I can tell they've made progress in these last week and a half?
Yeah, so, he said it. He gave us a little inkling in the presser when he said, he's a little pissed off, and nobody should be happy. And I expect the team to reflect that if they want to embody their coach's personality. And you've had to sit in it for, that's the worst. Going into a bye week and sitting on a loss, you should be pissed, right? And I think for this football team, taking the road and going into some friendly but unfriendly confines, because I do think there'll be some Nebraska fans there, you should be playing with a high energy level, right? You got to look at that man next to you and just ask yourself, I understand what's going on around me. What can I do different as an individual to change the outcome? And I think that's how they got to approach this game. I think the effort level will be high.
Yeah. You boil this down to 3 things. I'm sure that's one of them. But what are those 3 things for Nebraska?
So I do think managing the emotions is number one. right? What's gone on these past couple of weeks? Am I angry? Am I more vindictive than I always think love wins, right? So if I'm approaching this deal, I want to be there for my brothers and for my coaches as I go on the road here, because I know I probably haven't done my part. So that's first and foremost. Manage that. Number two, I'm going to go back to what we briefly talked about. Stop the run, right? Make them throw the ball over your head. There has been some reluctance for SC to do it. Listen, they clearly aren't comfortable by design. Let's see if we can continue to make them uncomfortable. Stop the run. And then the most important thing for me, whether it's offense or defense, and I can't believe I'm going to do three keys without talking about special teams, is third down. Nebraska's got to extend drives on third down to give yourself a chance to score points, because we know
You're going to get into the 40-yard, the opponent's 40-yard, and the 2 side. You need to generate points. Once you do, and then the other way, defensively, stop drives. If you could get SC off the field on third down and get this thing in 4-4, that's the place where they haven't been good, is they can get into the second.
I'll add in that the other recruiter would split out. So yeah. So we'll see what happens this weekend out in LA. Be back next week to preview the game against the Celtics.